Hello.
Good evening.
Yes, good
Good
evening.
evening.
This is a speech that I am going to talk about having to do with the modern concepts of atmospheric sciences and the earliest history of it from today and their links between pollution. Wow. This is about the impacts sustained from climate adaptation to our present day. Environmental sciences has targeted air pollution and the reductions of it in a process of reducing health risks and in also doing so to avert from some sustained climatological impacts that have been known to be caused by it. Its significant sources From significant sources, it has been recommended that we try and do so with extenuatory practices so that we may obtain reduction and prevention of these sorts of impacts on our health and risks to the environment. The diversification of the atmosphere includes the earliest known form of it 4 billion years ago to the destruction of Earth and the reformation of a new atmosphere after our moon formed March 1 and 2. So our atmosphere that we have today, this thin, invisible, transparent, gaseous envelope that we breathe, is what we're left with today. And all our everyday activity has resulted in it having some form of counterpart as we have inhabited it that becomes more evident. See, environmental fields long ago supposed and disposed to proposing the fluctuations of gases. These people that we know of today include Thomas Chamberlain, Arrhenius, and Colligette of Hogburn, who initially hypothesized where our atmosphere may sustain or experience feedback effects, which were hypothesized. So in saying that biologists who made these early suggestions were actually right once the atmospheric sciences and environmental sciences were studied further. As this matter includes issues arising from these studies, the known associated forms that we can expect environmental processes that are proposed to affect our health begin from DNA mutation and forward to developmental child risks, adult diseases, forms of asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, and in even some cases cancer. This is what our consumer economies have gradually been not inclusive of in creating air pollution and its associated risks to our health. While the token on one hand exists that natural pollution comes from natural sources. We can find it from geologic processes that enter into the earth, or then we can expect that when a volcano erupts that particulate fine dust that ends up in the atmosphere also is a natural pollutant.
Mm-hmm.
Terratransformational processes also release so-called greenhouse gas pollutants, or in a form of that compound of mixture. Originally, ozone, once it's depleted, was the most common form of natural pollutant, or depleted ozone. Conversely, as ozone depletion became extensively scrutinized, there were a series of concerns having chemical smog, scrubbing stacks that just were direct emitters of massive amounts of pollution that ultimately came of so much concern that the Clean Air Act was established in 1963. And following it here were the descriptions in these small spaces right here where there was a source of either pollution coming from here from traffic, here coming from industrial areas, agricultural where we don't see land, and then the energy production sectors which were here. Mainly as a result of that, in 1963 and 1985, the Montreal Clean Air Convention was enacted and a treaty was passed so that ozone could actually be protected from uncertain processes of which they weren't sure as a result of ozone being depleted from gases, that there would be, in extent, further damages that could be avoided, prevented, and hence that being part of, the atmospheric pollutants of the time. The Clean Air Convention for ozone depletion was enacted. Though dangers and exposures were acknowledged, the issues of pollution and airborne compound gases continue to exist. As acid rain formed, air toxics formed, oxides, sulfur oxides, nitric oxides, bromide, iodine, and chlorines and carbons that were not good for the atmosphere tended to become regulated. This resulted in amendments to the Clean Air Act that was adopted in 1963. While pollution is defined as any substance that is in the air that is poisonous or harmful to life, vegetation, and an environment, so is classified air contamination, air pollution. Statistical reports also imply the climatic implication as a major concern. While on one hand we have CFCs and pollution, on the other hand we have climatic adaptation, which means the pollen season takes longer throughout the year, which exposes us to allergens for a longer period throughout the year. Of these so-called CFCs and natural pollutants, we have something called aeroallergens. Aeroallergens can be studied for their quality in the air pollution index, or the air quality index, mainly AIRNOW.gov, or when you pick up the paper, the index probably has a pollen column index for it.
That's why you suffer with allergies.
So while the climate expands, another problem incurs. The pollen itself, such as the ragweed pollen or an allergen, it also has become more potent. Something just to keep in mind of, and the effects, besides that. As time has gone on, inventions for technologies such as filtration of carbon dioxide improves the clean air quality that is emitted instead of pollutants. So conversely, in all these paradigms of man-made sources to avoid pollution, we've arrived at our conclusion for this visual aid speech, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.